Look closely at what happens to a human being the exact moment life snaps them in half. Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow and erratic, your blink rate spikes uncontrollably, and your central nervous system floods your brain with high concentration cortisol, locking you into a primitive fight or flight freeze. Most people view this state of being broken as an absolute catastrophe. They spend months, sometimes years, wallowing in emotional exhaustion, asking the universe, why me? And waiting for an external savior or a surge of motivation to piece them back together. That is a fatal operational error. In advanced behavioral science, we know that when your life shatters, something extraordinary happens beneath the surface. Your psychological defense mechanisms collapse. The carefully constructed facade, the social conditioning, the ego, and the need for cheap approval are instantly wiped clean. You are left in a state of raw, unvarnished neurological plasticity. Being broken is not the end of your story. It is the only moment in your adult life where your internal software is completely unlocked and open for rewrite. If you walk away right now, you will continue trying to patch up your life with temporary emotional bandages. You will fall back into the same submissive behaviors, the same mental loops, and the same vulnerable baseline that allowed you to be broken in the first place. Stay with me. I am going to break down the cold, precision mechanics of human baseline recalibration, showing you how to leverage your rock-bottom state to rebuild yourself into an unshakable, high-authority force that nothing can ever break again. When life delivers a catastrophic blow, whether through sudden loss, betrayal, failure, or deep personal trauma, it does not just disrupt your daily routine. It attacks your central nervous system at a fundamental biological level. Your brain's automated threat detection mechanisms lock into overdrive. You leak subtle micro-behaviors of defeat. Your shoulders slouch, your gaze drops to the floor, your voice loses its pitch control, and your movements become frantic or heavy. You begin reacting to the internal chemical storm inside your body rather than the reality in front of you. 90% of the agony you experience when life breaks you is not caused by the event itself. It is caused by your brain's attempt to fight the breakdown, adding catastrophic narratives to raw biological stress. To recover, you must stop treating your broken state as a weakness and start utilizing it as a precision calibration tool. Here are the operational rules to rebuild your baseline from the ground up. First, when your life is going smoothly, your psychological habits are rigid and set in concrete. It is almost impossible to execute radical personal change when you feel comfortable and safe. A severe crisis breaks that concrete. The collapse of your old life shatters your ego defenses, stripping away the illusion of control. This raw, uncomfortable state is the single most potent window of opportunity you will ever possess. Do not rush to numb the pain or distract yourself with cheap cope. Accept the raw reality of the reset. Recognize that the old version of you was vulnerable enough to be broken, and use this state of total psychological fluidity to engineer a new, high-authority operating system. Second, you cannot think your way out of a broken central nervous system. You must physically command it. When trauma strikes, your body automatically adopts a submissive, defeated posture that signals your brain to keep releasing stress hormones. Interrupt this feedback loop through somatic mechanics. Force your posture upright, expand your chest, and pull your shoulders down away from your ears. Plant both feet firmly on the ground, lock your physical body into total stillness, and drive your breathing down into deep, slow abdominal cycles. When you hold absolute physical composure despite internal turmoil, your body sends a clear signal back to your brain that you are in total control. The adrenaline subsides, the cognitive fog clears, and your prefrontal cortex comes back online. Third, The mammalian brain loves to construct stories around pain. I wasn't good enough. They betrayed me. I will never recover. These subjective narratives compound raw discomfort into years of chronic psychological suffering. Execute strict behavioral observation. Isolate the objective facts from the emotional story. If you lost your business or a relationship ended, do not register a personal tragedy. Register a change in financial variables or an alteration in social alignment. By treating the breakdown as neutral, environmental data rather than a personal affliction, you deny the limbic system the emotional fuel it needs to keep you trapped in grief. You transform from a helpless victim into an objective operator analyzing a new landscape. Fourth, do not attempt to fix your entire life in a single day. When a human baseline is shattered, grand declarations and massive goals only create overwhelm, leading to deeper paralysis. Focus exclusively on micro-behavioral discipline. Regain control over tiny nonverbal details. Wake up at the exact same minute. Hold your eye contact 2 seconds longer in every conversation. Speak in a lower, unhurried vocal pitch. Move with deliberate, measured speed. Every small micro-action executed with precision sends a signal to your subconscious that you are regaining territorial control over your life. These small wins stack exponentially, quietly constructing an impenetrable foundation of internal authority. Fifth, most people who go through a crisis try to patch up their old selves and get back to normal. They want to return to the exact same baseline that was fragile enough to break. Do not repair the old structure. Become the architect of a completely new entity. Use the raw materials of your breakdown to build higher boundaries, sharper focus, and an unshakable presence. Engineers do not rebuild a collapsed bridge using the exact same weak materials. They reinforce the foundation and use stronger steel. Build your new baseline so solid that no external crisis, no social pressure, and no personal tragedy can ever rattle your frame again. Leveraging the psychological and neurological plasticity created by trauma is the foundational mechanism for turning a catastrophic breakdown into an absolute operational reset. When life is moving smoothly, the human mind operates within rigid, deeply ingrained behavioral loops. Your self-image, social conditioning, ego defenses, and daily habits become solidified into concrete, making radical self-transformation nearly impossible during times of safety and comfort. In a state of equilibrium, the brain naturally resists change, opting instead for familiar cognitive patterns, even if those patterns are subtle sources of weakness or submissive behavior. A severe crisis, however, acts as a high-impact hammer that shatters this mental concrete in an instant. The sudden collapse of an expectation, relationship, career, or personal identity strips away your protective ego layers, wiping out the illusion of control and leaving your underlying psychological software completely exposed. In advanced behavioral mechanics, this state of shattered composure is recognized not as a tragedy, but as a rare window of acute neurobiological fluidness. When your old reality disintegrates, the mental structures that previously dictated your fears, needs for social validation, and submissive habits lose their anchor points. Your central nervous system is forced into an open, highly impressionable state as it attempts to reorganize itself around new environmental inputs. Most individuals make the critical error of treating this raw exposure as an emergency that requires immediate emotional numbing, distraction, or frantic attempts to reconstruct their old life. By rushing to patch up the cracks with cheap comfort or desperate rationalizations, they waste the single most powerful opportunity an adult human possesses: the ability to rewrite their foundational baseline without resistance from their own ego. To capitalize on this window of opportunity, you must embrace the cold, uncomfortable reality of the total reset. You must explicitly acknowledge that the previous iteration of your life, the habits, nonverbal posture, thought patterns, and boundaries you held, was vulnerable enough to be broken by external circumstances. Instead of mourning the destruction of that fragile framework, you treat the pain as necessary heat used to soften rigid metal before forging it into a stronger tool. You refuse to retreat into cope, victimhood, or superficial positivity, recognizing that those emotional buffers only serve to re-solidify your old, flawed operating system. You allow the old self to die completely in the wreckage, using the raw, unconditioned state of your mind to consciously select every thought, boundary, and rule that will define your future behavior. Forcing somatic baseline recalibration under severe psychological stress is the primary physical mechanism for taking manual override of a panicked central nervous system. When life delivers a devastating blow, the mammalian brain does not process the trauma solely as an abstract mental concept. It translates the emotional shock into immediate, destructive physiological changes. Your body automatically enters a primitive freeze or flight posture designed to signal vulnerability and defeat to the surrounding environment. Your shoulders round forward to protect your vital organs, your neck locks up, your eye movements become rapid and erratic, and your respiration shifts from deep abdominal cycles into shallow, high-frequency chest breathing. This physical collapse creates a catastrophic internal feedback loop. Your submissive, collapsed body continuously signals to your brain that you are under active attack, forcing your system to flood your bloodstream with high-concentration cortisol and adrenaline, which further paralyzes your ability to think clearly. To break this destructive neurosomatic loop, you must execute an immediate physical override through cold, mechanical posture control. You do not attempt to calm your mind with empty positive affirmations. You force your physical body to assume the exact nonverbal posture of an unshakable, high-authority operator. You plant both feet flat on the floor, pull your shoulders back and down away from your ears, and expand your chest to occupy physical space with absolute ease. You consciously eliminate all nervous micro-gestures, face touching, and rapid head movements, freezing your physical frame into absolute stillness. Simultaneously, you take manual control of your respiratory mechanics, overriding the rapid, shallow panic breathing by driving slow, deliberate breath cycles deep into your diaphragm, holding the air briefly before releasing it at a measured rate. This deliberate physical stillness and low-frequency breathing acts as a powerful bottom-up signal that bypasses your panicked conscious mind and speaks directly to your autonomic nervous system. When your physical body holds an expansive, immobile posture while executing slow, regulated breathing, your brain is forced to adapt to these physiological reality inputs. It concludes that because the body is displaying absolute physical safety and stillness, the threat must no longer be lethal. In response, your brain begins to dial back the production of stress hormones, slowing your heart rate and suppressing the hypervigilant panic response. The cognitive fog that accompanies severe trauma begins to clear, allowing oxygen and blood flow to return to your prefrontal cortex so you can resume high-level strategic reasoning. Executing the micro-behavioral rebuild is the precise operational method for reconstructing a shattered life without succumbing to cognitive overwhelm, emotional paralysis, or false starts. When a human baseline is completely broken, the natural tendency is to fixate on the sheer magnitude of the devastation, attempting to solve every complex problem simultaneously through grand declarations, massive lifestyle changes, and emotional surges of motivation. This macro approach is an operational disaster. Attempting to overhaul your entire existence while your central nervous system is still recovering from severe shock creates extreme cognitive friction, triggering an immediate stress reaction that leads to total paralysis and deeper feelings of helplessness. True, unshakable authority is never rebuilt through sweeping emotional gestures. It is meticulously assembled brick by brick through the ruthless execution of disciplined micro-behaviors. To initiate the micro-rebuild, you must completely shrink your operational focus down to the absolute smallest units of human behavior. You bypass the massive, overwhelming life questions and focus exclusively on controlling tiny, nonverbal details that are entirely within your direct physical power. You regulate the exact minute your feet hit the floor in the morning, eliminating snooze button hesitation. You control the precise cadence of your speech, dropping your vocal pitch into an unhurried lower register rather than speaking with the high-pitched speed of a panicked mind. You hold your gaze steady during interactions, extending eye contact by 2 seconds before breaking it smoothly. You move your body with deliberate, measured speed, refusing to let ambient stress force you into frantic, nervous gestures. Every single one of these micro-actions represents a micro-territory of your life being brought back under your absolute control. Neutralizing the suffering narrative by isolating objective data is the essential cognitive mechanism for stripping emotional pain of its ability to paralyze your life. Human suffering is rarely a direct product of physical reality or external events. It is manufactured almost entirely by the subjective, highly dramatic stories the mind constructs around those events. When a catastrophe strikes, the primitive limbic brain immediately generates a cascade of catastrophic interpretations, attaching personal victimhood, self-pity, and permanent failure to the situation. Statements like, "My life is ruined," "They destroyed me," or "I will never recover from this," are not objective descriptions of fact. They are emotional fiction designed to justify retreat, passivity, and chronic psychological distress. When you allow your mind to accept these subjective narratives as absolute truth, you compound simple, manageable challenges into years of unyielding internal agony. To permanently neutralize this suffering loop, you must enforce strict, uncompromising behavioral observation by decoupling raw facts from your emotional commentary. The moment a severe setback occurs, you must execute a cognitive quarantine, isolating the exact, undeniable variables of the situation while discarding every adjective, judgment, and story attached to them. If a business venture collapses or a long-term relationship ends, the reactive mind frames the event as a devastating personal failure that defines your worth. Through raw behavioral observation, however, you systematically strip away the drama. You do not register a tragedy or a personal betrayal. You register a change in financial metrics, a shift in legal agreements, or the termination of a social contract between two biological organisms. By forcing your mind to describe the event strictly using neutral, non-dramatic data points, you deny the emotional centers of the brain the dramatic material required to construct a victim complex. This rigorous isolation of objective data fundamentally alters how your brain processes crisis, shifting you from a state of emotional paralysis to high-level strategic problem-solving. Emotional narratives consume immense amounts of finite cognitive bandwidth, locking your central nervous system into a continuous loop of outrage, anxiety, and grief. When you strip away the story, that wasted mental energy is instantly reclaimed. Your prefrontal cortex comes back online, allowing you to view your new reality not as a personal punishment, but as an interesting structural problem that simply requires a series of calculated mechanical adjustments. You cease asking why the event happened to you, focusing instead entirely on what specific objective variables need to be manipulated next to restore total operational control over your environment. Mastering narrative neutralization gives you an absolute cognitive immunity against the inevitable storms of life. You realize that while pain and unexpected disruption are unavoidable facts of the physical world, long-term psychological suffering is entirely optional, a choice made by an undisciplined mind that clings to emotional stories. By training yourself to see every breakdown as neutral environmental data, you render yourself completely untouchable to external chaos, betrayal, and unexpected loss. You walk through the most devastating crises with cold, crystal clear focus, operating as an unshakable observer who processes reality as it actually is, completely free from the self-manufactured illusions that keep the rest of the world trapped in perpetual weakness. Architectural personal sovereignty is the ultimate operational phase of rebuilding after a catastrophic collapse, shifting your focus from fragile self-repair to deliberate identity engineering. Most individuals who navigate a severe crisis make the fundamental mistake of attempting to patch up their old selves, desperately trying to return to who they were before the breakdown occurred. This approach is intrinsically flawed. Reconstructing the exact same psychological architecture, boundary structures, and behavioral baseline that allowed you to be broken in the first place guarantees that future environmental stress will produce the exact same catastrophic result. You do not want to fix the old bridge using the same weak materials. You want to demolish the remaining debris and erect an entirely new structure capable of withstanding maximum pressure. To act as an architect rather than a repairman, you must view the clean slate provided by your breakdown as a blank blueprint for absolute identity design. You systematically audit every aspect of your former self, identifying the submissive habits, excessive needs for external approval, soft boundaries, and nonverbal leaks that compromised your original frame. You decide, with cold and calculated precision, exactly what traits, rules, and non-negotiables will govern your new operating system. You determine how your new iteration will occupy space, how it will communicate boundaries without defensive justification, and how it will filter out low-value social noise. You are no longer accepting an identity passively handed to you by your upbringing, social conditioning, or past trauma. You are actively engineering a high-authority persona designed for absolute psychological dominance and resilience. This architectural shift completely redefines your relationship with your past trauma, turning what was once a source of shame or pain into the foundational bedrock of your authority. When you build a sovereign identity out of the rubble of a breakdown, your internal security ceases to rely on favorable external circumstances. You no longer need the world to be kind, predictable, or safe, because your confidence is derived entirely from the proven knowledge that you can be completely broken down to zero and still rebuild yourself into something stronger. This internal certainty radiates through every micro-behavior you exhibit. Your eye contact becomes unyielding, your physical posture becomes rooted and effortless, and your voice carries the quiet, unhurried weight of an individual who has walked through psychological fire and taken total command of the outcome. Mastering architectural personal sovereignty ensures that you emerge from every crisis not merely recovered, but entirely evolved into a higher order of human performance. You stop living in fear of future losses, betrayals, or unexpected failures, recognizing that any event capable of breaking your current frame simply provides the raw materials needed to build an even more formidable baseline. You step into every environment as an absolute sovereign over your mind, body, and destiny, completely detached from the need for external validation and entirely anchored in your self-constructed frame. By choosing to engineer an unbreakable new identity, rather than repairing a fragile past, you establish a level of personal authority, composure, and power that no external force in the world can ever take away from you.